In 1837, while Britain sped into the future on rails, Tsarist Russia was stranded in mud and snow, its empire choking on outdated roads and horse carts. Then, against all odds, a single experimental railway appeared near St. Petersburg. It promised to drag an entire empire into the age of steam, but at what price and with whose vision? The story of Russia's first railways begins with anxiety, suspicion, and one of the most radical gambles in imperial history. If you want to unravel how Russia's age of steam was truly born, make sure to like and subscribe. Every spring, Russia's roads turned to rivers of mud. In autumn, the same routes vanished under rain and sleet. For half the year, armies and grain convoys crawled across the empire, trapped by the seasons. Horses struggled through unpaved tracks, while rivers and canals froze or flooded. By the 1830s, Britain's trains already ran between Liverpool and Manchester in a few hours, carrying coal, cotton, and crowds of workers. Russian officials watched with a mix of envy and alarm, calculating just how far behind their empire had fallen. Inside the Winter Palace, Tsar Nicholas I weighed the reports. As an autocrat shaped by military order, he valued discipline and control, qualities that seemed threatened by foreign machines and the unknown costs of industrial change. Yet the message from his own ministers was clear. Russia risked becoming a giant that moved at the speed of a mule cart, while rivals moved at the speed of steam. In 1834, a new figure entered the scene. Franz Anton von Gerstner, an engineer from Austria, arrived in St. Petersburg with a radical plan. After months of travel and study, he delivered a memorandum to the Tsar on January 6, 1835. Gerstner's vision was bold, a network of iron rails stretching from St. Petersburg to Moscow, then onward to Nizhny Novgorod and Kazan. He argued that railways could tie Russia's vast distances together, moving troops and goods faster than any river or road. The proposal landed on Nicholas's desk at a moment of deep anxiety, when the empire's prestige and security seemed to hang on its ability to catch up or risk falling further behind. Nicholas hesitated. The idea of a trunk railway network was unprecedented for Russia, and the costs seemed staggering. But Gerstner's proposal forced the question: was it riskier to build or to be left behind? The Tsar ordered his council to study the plan, turning Russia's strategic lag into the start of a concrete engineering debate, a debate that would soon reshape the empire's future. If you like what you see, be sure to like and subscribe. On February 28, 1835, Nicholas I gathered his state council and top ministers to debate the future of railways in Russia. The question on the table was not just technology, but the balance of risk, control, and national ambition. Gerstner's sweeping plan for a trunk line network was set aside as too costly and too bold. Instead, the council agreed on a more cautious approach: a short experimental railway from St. Petersburg to Tsarskoye Selo, with an extension to Pavlovsk. This compromise would allow Russia to test steam power on its own terms, without handing over too much authority or too much money to foreign hands. Legal authority followed swiftly. On March 21, 1836, Nicholas I issued the first imperial decree authorizing the Tsarskoye Selo Railway as a pilot project. Less than a month later, on April 15, 1836, a second decree laid out the charter for a new joint stock company. Count Alexei Bobrinsky took the lead as chairman, joined by merchants Benedict Kramer and Ivan Conrad Plitt, and Gerstner as chief engineer. The charter spelled out privileges: tax-free import of rails and locomotives, rights to acquire land along the route with compensation, and the freedom to raise private capital. The state, wary of financial overreach, kept tight oversight, but allowed the company to take the first steps. The new line would run 26 to 27 kilometers connecting the capital to the imperial estates. Engineers settled on a broad gauge of 6 feet, wider than British tracks, anticipating the challenges of Russian soil and climate. On May 1, 1836, workers broke ground. For the first time, Russian earth was cut and graded for iron rails, not muddy roads. What began as a council debate moved rapidly into action, with Bobrinsky's company now holding the legal and financial keys to Russia's railway experiment. Crates from Newcastle and Leeds arrived at the port of St. Petersburg, each stamped with the names of British firms that dominated the world of steam. 6 locomotives, built by Robert Stephenson and Comyn and Wilson and Co., formed the backbone of Russia's first railway fleet. Alongside them came 44 passenger coaches, some open, some closed, and 19 freight wagons, all shipped across the Baltic and hauled by cart to the construction site. The centerpiece was Provorny, called the Nimble, a gleaming engine weighing nearly 12 tons. On the morning of the inaugural run, Provorny pulled 8 carriages and reached speeds close to 40 miles per hour, covering the full line in just 35 minutes. For a country where travel had always meant days on muddy roads, this was a revelation. Every bolt, every axle, every length of iron rail was foreign-made, assembled under the supervision of British engineers and Russian crews still learning the language of steam. The scale of this import, 6 engines and dozens of carriages, made clear that Russia's first steps into the railway age rested on British technology, not domestic industry. Swamps and snowdrifts quickly turned the Tsarskoye Selo Railway into a proving ground for foreign technology and Russian stubbornness. As soon as the first rails were laid, the land beneath them began to sag. Spring thaws turned the lowlands south of St. Petersburg into a sodden mess. Tracks shifted, embankments slumped, and drainage ditches overflowed. Gerstner's team responded with deep gravel beds, timber pilings, and thick layers of ballast, solutions that cost far more than anyone had budgeted. Winter brought its own trials. Oil in the locomotive bearings thickened and froze, gears jammed, and boilers struggled to hold pressure in sub-zero air. To keep steam up, engineers built heated sheds and tried heavier lubricants, but the fixes came with mounting bills. Every adaptation, whether extra drainage or imported grease, meant delays and angry reports to the board. By 1838, the project's budget had swollen far beyond initial estimates. Gerstner, insisting on building to trunkline standards, clashed with Russian administrators who wanted speed and thrift. The board accused him of extravagance and dismissed him before the line's full extension opened. His vision would shape Russian railways for decades, but his experiment ended with a cold farewell. If you like what you see, be sure to like and subscribe. At noon on October 30th, 1837, crowds pressed against the fences along the new line from St. Petersburg, craning for a glimpse of the unknown. The locomotive Provorny hissed and steamed at the head of 8 carriages, its iron form gleaming in the pale autumn light. The whistle's shriek startled horses and drew nervous laughter from the gathered officials, merchants, and townspeople. For many, it was the first time seeing a machine move without a horse, just fire, water, and steel. Franz von Gerstner himself took the controls. The train accelerated past frozen faces and waving hats, covering the 27 kilometers to Tsarskoye Selo in just 35 minutes. The speed was astonishing, the journey a blur compared to days of jolting carriage rides. Spectators called it the fire carriage, marveling at the rush of wind and the acrid scent of coal. Nicholas I watched as his court and city elite arrived ahead of schedule, the experiment now a living reality. At Pavlovsk, the railway's southern terminus, a new kind of Russian leisure began to take root. The station doubled as a concert hall, where orchestras played and the fashionable gathered, turning the end of the line into a social event. Within months, the novelty of steam travel became a fixture of urban life, part spectacle, part status symbol, and a signal that Russia was stepping into the modern world. If you like what you see, be sure to like and subscribe. On February 1, 1842, Nicholas I signed the decree authorizing a railway between St. Petersburg and Moscow, a project spanning nearly 650 kilometers. The experiment at Tsarskoye Selo had proven that steam could conquer Russian mud, frost, and distance. Now the empire committed to a main line connecting its political and historical capitals. The St. Petersburg to Moscow Railway would become one of the world's longest continuous railways at the time, built to the same broad gauge and robust standards tested on the pilot route. The decision by Nicholas I set the course for an entire network, not just a single demonstration. Over the next decades, the Russian state expanded its reach by rail, laying the foundation for a system that today stretches more than 85,000 kilometers under Russian railways. Nearly 70% of all domestic freight now moves by train, a scale unimaginable in the age of muddy roads. The leap from a 27-kilometer experiment to a national backbone began with a single imperial signature, turning a court spectacle into a tool of empire. If you like what you see, be sure to like and subscribe. Today, Russia's vast rail network still shapes its economy, military, and identity. Proof of how a single act of modernization can redefine a nation's trajectory. As technology continues to redraw borders and priorities, the stakes for adaptation remain as urgent as ever. Thanks for watching. If you liked what you see, please subscribe and give the video a like. Share your thoughts in the comments below.